subscribe channel, like and comment video.
Farmyard. The summer sun blazed over the quiet farmyard, where a mother duck sat patiently on her nest beneath the shade of an old oak tree. She had been sitting there for weeks, keeping her eggs warm, waiting for the moment when her ducklings would finally hatch. The other farm animals would waddle or stroll past occasionally, asking when the blessed event would occur. "Any day now," she would reply with maternal pride, shifting slightly on her nest. One by one, the eggs began to crack. Tiny beaks poked through the shells, and soon the nest was filled with the cheerful peeping of fluffy yellow ducklings. The mother duck counted them with delight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But wait, there was still one egg left, much larger than the others, sitting stubbornly unhatched in the corner of the nest. "How strange," muttered the mother duck. "This egg is taking much longer than the rest." An old duck from the neighboring pond waddled over to investigate. She peered at the large egg with suspicion, her experienced eyes narrowing. "That looks like a turkey egg to me," she declared. "I was tricked into hatching turkey eggs once." "What a nightmare." "They're afraid of water, you know. Absolutely useless creatures for a respectable duck family." But the mother duck was determined. "I've sat this long already, I might as well sit a little longer and see what happens." Finally, with a loud crack, the large egg split open. Out tumbled a peculiar-looking bird, much larger than his brothers and sisters, with gray feathers instead of yellow down, and a longer, more awkward neck. The mother duck looked at him with confusion, then forced herself to smile. He was her child, after all, even if he didn't look quite like the others. "Well," she said, trying to sound cheerful, "you're certainly a big one, aren't you? Let's see how you take to the water tomorrow. That will tell us what you really are." Scene 2, the first swimming lesson. The next morning dawned bright and beautiful, and the mother duck led her little parade down to the pond. The 5 yellow ducklings waddled along behind her in a perfect line, peeping excitedly. At the end came the large gray one, stumbling over his own oversized feet, trying desperately to keep up. "Come along, dear," his mother called back to him encouragingly. When they reached the water's edge, the mother duck dove in gracefully, and one by one, her ducklings followed. The 5 yellow ones took to the water like, well, ducks to water, paddling in delightful circles and dunking their heads beneath the surface. Then came the gray duckling's turn. He hesitated for just a moment, then launched himself into the pond with an ungainly splash. To everyone's surprise, especially the old duck who had predicted disaster, he swam beautifully. In fact, he swam even more gracefully than his siblings, his long neck arching elegantly as he glided across the water. "Well, he's definitely not a turkey," the mother duck announced with satisfaction. "See how beautifully he swims. He's just a bit different, that's all. And when you look at him properly, he has his own kind of charm." But when they returned to the farmyard, the reception was far less kind. The other ducks stared at the strange gray duckling and began to whisper among themselves. The hens clucked disapprovingly. The turkey gobbled rudely. Even the girl who brought the corn each morning wrinkled her nose when she saw him. "What an ugly duckling!" exclaimed one particularly mean-spirited drake. "Look at his gray feathers and that ridiculous long neck." The other ducklings began to join in, pecking at their gray brother and pushing him away from the food. His own siblings, influenced by the others, started to avoid him. Even his mother, though she tried to be kind, sometimes found herself wishing he looked more like the others. Day after day, the mockery continued. The gray duckling was chased, pecked, and scorned by everyone in the farmyard. The ducks bit him, the hens pecked him, and the girl who fed the poultry kicked him aside with her foot. His brothers and sisters would say, "We hope the cat gets you, you ugly creature." Even his mother said, "I wish you were far away from here." The poor duckling was miserable. He felt utterly alone in the world, unwanted and unloved. One evening, as the sun set red and orange over the farmyard, he made a desperate decision. He couldn't bear another day of this cruelty. He would run away. Scene 3, the wide world. Under the cover of darkness, the ugly duckling squeezed through a gap in the fence and fled into the wild marsh beyond. He ran until his legs ached and his heart pounded, finally collapsing in the tall reeds near a vast, lonely swamp. He spent a frightening night there, listening to strange sounds in the darkness, feeling more alone than ever. In the morning, he encountered a pair of wild geese, or other, wild ganders, young and full of swagger. "You're so ugly," one of them said, though not entirely unkindly, "that we almost like you." "Want to fly with us? There are some nice young geese in the next marsh over." But before the duckling could respond, a terrifying sound shattered the morning calm. Bang! Bang! At the sound of hunters' guns, the two wild ganders fell dead into the reeds, and hunting dogs came crashing through the marsh, their teeth bared and their eyes wild. One enormous dog stopped right in front of the duckling, its tongue hanging out, its teeth gleaming. The duckling closed his eyes, certain his end had come. But the dog simply sniffed him and ran on. The duckling waited, trembling, until silence returned to the marsh. "Even the dog doesn't want me," he thought miserably. "I'm too ugly even for that." He wandered for hours until he found a small, tumble-down cottage. Through a crack in the door, he slipped inside, desperate for shelter. An old woman lived there with her cat and her hen. When she discovered the duckling in the morning, she was delighted. "A duck. Perhaps it will lay eggs." She decided to keep him for 3 weeks to see. But the cat and the hen, who considered themselves the masters of the household, were less welcoming. "Can you lay eggs?" demanded the hen. "Can you purr or arch your back?" asked the cat. When the duckling admitted he could do neither, they dismissed him as worthless. He tried to explain how wonderful it felt to float on the water, to dive beneath the surface, but they thought he was mad. "You're talking nonsense," said the hen. "Ask the carter. He's the wisest creature I know, or whether he enjoys swimming or diving underwater." "Ask our mistress, the old woman. There's no one cleverer than her in the whole world. Do you think she wants to swim or feel the water closing over her head?" The duckling felt his heart sink. Nobody understood him. Nobody could understand the longing he felt for the open water, for the freedom of the wide sky above. He couldn't stay in this dark cottage any longer. He thanked them for their hospitality and slipped away. Scene 4, Transformation. Autumn arrived, painting the world in shades of gold and crimson. The duckling found a secluded spot by a lake where he could live in peace, swimming and finding what food he could. One evening, as the sun set magnificently over the water, a flock of the most beautiful birds he had ever seen rose from the reeds. They were brilliant white, with long, graceful necks and powerful wings. They were swans, migrating south for the winter. As they flew overhead, calling to each other with haunting cries, the duckling felt a strange sensation in his heart, a yearning so powerful it almost hurt. He let out a cry in response, a sound he didn't even know he could make. The beautiful birds flew on, disappearing into the distance, but the duckling couldn't forget them. All through the long, bitter winter, he thought of those magnificent creatures. Winter was harsh and cruel. The lake began to freeze, and the duckling had to swim in smaller and smaller circles to keep a patch of water from icing over completely. Finally, exhausted, he became trapped in the ice one frigid night. A farmer found him the next morning, broke the ice, and carried him home. But the farmer's children wanted to play with him, and terrified by their loud voices and grabbing hands, the duckling caused chaos in the house. He knocking over a milk pail, fluttering into the butter, and falling into the flour barrel. The farmer's wife chased him with a poker, and he barely escaped with his life, fleeing back into the frozen wilderness. Somehow, through hunger and cold and desperate loneliness, the duckling survived that terrible winter. Then, gradually, the world began to change. The sun grew warmer, the ice melted, and the larks began to sing. Spring had arrived, the most beautiful spring the duckling had ever experienced. He felt strange stirrings in his wings and, stretching them out, discovered they had grown strong and powerful. Before he knew what he was doing, he was lifting into the air, flying higher and faster than he had ever imagined possible. He flew until he reached a beautiful garden with apple trees in blossom and fragrant lilacs hanging over a winding stream. On the water swam 3 magnificent white swans, their feathers gleaming in the sunlight. The duckling recognized them immediately as the beautiful birds he had seen in the autumn. A feeling of both longing and sadness overcame him. "I will fly down to them," he decided. "Even if they peck me to death for daring to approach them, ugly as I am. Better to be killed by those magnificent creatures than to be bitten by ducks, pecked by hens, and suffer through another winter." He descended to the water, bowing his head low, expecting the worst. But when he looked down at his reflection in the clear stream, he gasped in astonishment. Looking back at him was not an ugly grey duckling, but a beautiful swan. His feathers were pure white, his neck long and elegant, his form graceful and strong. The 3 other swans swam toward him, welcoming him with gentle calls. Children playing in the garden saw him and shouted with joy, "Look, a new swan! And he's the most beautiful of all." The young swan felt overwhelmed with happiness, though he was also humble, remembering all too well his days of suffering. He rustled his feathers, curved his slender neck, and thought with a full heart, "I never dreamed of such happiness when I was the ugly duckling."